Welcome back, capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. Today, we are taking a look at my conference title picks as well as my playoff prediction for this upcoming college football season. Who will make the cut? Who will win it all? Let's go ahead and find out. But first, as always, be sure to like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. And check out the O&O Sports social medias for the full predictions. Links to those will be in the description down below. And with that out of the way, let's get into it, starting with how we're going to find out who makes the playoff this year. And to do that, let's take a look at our conference title games. Starting with the group of 5, and I think the G5 representative once again comes out of the Mountain West Conference. Last year it was Boise State, and I have them making the Mountain West title game once again this year, but I have them losing to the UNLV Rebels, who are now led by Coach Dan Mullen, and they bring in so much talent out of the Power 4 level. Guys like Anthony Calandria, Justin Flo, Alex Orji, just to name a few. And I think they're able to put together a season kind of like Indiana's last year, where they absolutely take this team to new heights. I have them going 12-1 and representing the group of 5 in the playoff this year. And now let's move on to the ACC, and I think this one's pretty clear cut. I have the Clemson Tigers beating out Louisville in what should be a pretty fun game. Last year, I know Clemson fans did not have fun with that one at all. And I'm very high on the Cardinals this year. I love Isaac Brown. I love that offense altogether, but I just think the Clemson Tigers are way too loaded, both defensively and offensively. And that's why I'm locking them in as the ACC championship pick. And as for the Big 12, I think this conference is easily the most up in the air this year. They by far have the most parity from top to bottom, but I have to pick one team, and in my prediction video I chose Iowa State and Texas Tech to make the Big 12 title game. And of those two, I honestly really like the Texas Tech Red Raiders to win it. I think this is their year. Joey McGuire is able to put it together with all of those elite transfer portal pickups they've made this year. Last year the defense was a question. I think they've addressed that more than enough, and that's why I have them winning the Big 12 this year. And jumping into the Big 2, starting with the Big 10, I have a conference rematch between the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Penn State Nittany Lions. And call me crazy, but I think this is the year of getting over the hump for a few teams, one of those teams being the Penn State Nittany Lions. I really like this squad all around. Defensively, they should be just as good as they were last year with getting Jim Knowles and retaining the amount of talent they did. And offensively, they are super versatile. Those two running backs are going to be a problem for defenses this year. They also get a ton of talent at wide receiver for Drew Aller. And I think the Buckeyes are going to be a much more volatile team this year. I do have them losing in the first matchup to the Buckeyes, but this is their rematch and they win the Big 10 title this year. And for the SEC, it'll be another unorthodox pick. I have the Texas Longhorns taking on the LSU Tigers. And I think this game could end up being the matchup to decide who the Heisman winner is between Arch Manning and Garrett Nussmeier. And ultimately, I have the Longhorns standing tall in this matchup. I like them a bit more all around. They're a much more well-rounded team than the Tigers are, in my opinion. And in their first 2 years in the SEC, 2 for 2 in appearances and 1 for 2 in conference title wins is nothing to sneeze at all. This year I have Arch Manning winning the Heisman and the Texas Longhorns taking the SEC title. And with that, let's figure out the field. How will these teams be seeded? Who gets in? Who gets left out? Let's go ahead and find that out. Obviously, I think we're starting with the SEC champions at number 1, the Texas Longhorns, followed by the Big 10 champions, the Penn State Nittany Lions. After them, batting third, I have the Clemson Tigers. And after them, I have a team I haven't been able to talk about much this season, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish at 4. Their schedule is somehow not as tough as it was last year. Very favorable in a lot of those matchups, a lot of home games, but I have them finishing 11-1 overall. CJ Carr to me is a perfect replacement for Riley Leonard. I think that defense should be just as good as it was last year, if not a little bit worse, but still very talented all around. And remember, this year we're doing straight seeding, so there doesn't have to be the top 4 conference championships in the top 4. It's just the top 4 best teams. I think Notre Dame is one of them. And moving on, I have the Big 12 champion Texas Tech Red Raiders at 5, followed by the Big 10 runners-up, the Ohio State Buckeyes at 6. I have the Buckeyes ahead of the 7-seeded SEC runner-up, the LSU Tigers, even though I have them finishing with the same record because of that extra conference win that Ohio State's going to have over the Tigers this year. And then I have the first at-large team being the Georgia Bulldogs. I have them finishing 3rd in the SEC ACC at 10-2, and I have them making in just over your group of 5 representatives, the UNLV Rebels. They're going to have a pretty weak conference schedule, which is why I have the Bulldogs slotted just above them, even though they're going to have 2 more losses this year. And then rounding out my list, I have the 3rd place Big Ten team, the Oregon Ducks, at 10, followed by our 4th SEC team, the Alabama Crimson Tide, at 11. Both of those teams I have going 10-2, but I have Oregon squeaking out Alabama for that 10 spot just because I think their record is a bit better overall. I like their wins a little bit better, and I like their losses a little bit better. And for my last spot, I'm going to go ahead and sneak in the ACC runners-up, the Louisville Cardinals, in at 12, which might be a bit controversial. There might be a few other teams here that could make the cut. This spot's going to be very, very contested every year, but of those remaining squads, I like the Cardinals the most. Now, with all of that out of the way, this is how the field is going to look based on my predictions. And with everything set in stone, let's go ahead and predict this playoff for this season. Starting in the top left-hand side with the Georgia Bulldogs and the UNLV Rebels, a matchup between Kirby Smart and Dan Mullen once again. Does it get more cinematic in that? I don't think so, but I have the Georgia Bulldogs winning handily in this. UNLV is going to be a solid squad. I just think their overall record is going to be a bit inflated by that weak conference, and I think Georgia is going to be much more talented and win this one fairly easily. Moving on down the line, it's Louisville versus Texas Tech, a very, very underrated matchup this year. I would really love to see this one at some point, even if it's not in the playoff. Ultimately, I'm going to have the Red Raiders pulling this one out just because I like their defense a little bit more, but I wouldn't be surprised if this one ended up being a shootout, which I am not opposed to seeing at all. And moving on into the right-hand side of your screen, it's Alabama at Ohio State. What a great matchup that is in the first round. And honestly, I'm going to take Alabama in an upset, mostly because I like this defense a lot more than Ohio State's. I think that front seven is going to be much more established. That Alabama offense is being slept on just a bit this year. I like them to eke this one out over the Buckeyes. Probably not by a lot, but it should be a good matchup either way. And into the top right-hand side, it's the Oregon Ducks versus the LSU Tigers. And really the story of this one is that Oregon defense taking on that LSU offense, and I like the LSU offense to win that matchup. Oregon's probably going to have the edge on the ground, but LSU is going to have a barrage of attacks through the air. I like them to really take advantage of that Oregon defense and pull this one out. And that brings us to the second round. Starting in the top left, it's Georgia versus Texas, the SEC title game rematch from last year. And I like Texas as the much more well-rounded team than Georgia, although it's not that much separation between these two squads. I like Texas's ground game to really take advantage of that interior defensive line and get this one done. I also like Arch Manning a lot more than Georgia's quarterbacks. I think he goes out and tears it up. And moving down, it's Notre Dame versus Texas Tech, a game that might look interesting on paper, but I have Notre Dame completely blowing out Texas Tech in the trenches and really giving it to the Red Raiders. That ground game should be one of the best in the country, and while I do think Texas Tech improves in the trenches, I don't think it's to the level that Notre Dame's going to be this year. And on the right-hand side, on the bottom, it's Clemson versus Alabama, rivals reunited once again. And although I really like Clemson this season, I like Alabama's offense just a little bit more. Defensively, I might give Clemson the edge, but not by much. And I do like Clemson's offense. They have a crazy wide receiver room, but I think they struggle a bit on the ground this year. I think Alabama takes advantage of that. I think they have the much better rush offense, and I think that's what puts them over the edge here. And moving up, it's LSU versus Penn State. What a matchup that would be. But similar to Notre Dame on the opposite side, I think Penn State's trenches are going to be just flat out better than LSU's. I think they outwork, out hustle, and outgain on the ground. I don't think LSU has a response for that, and I honestly don't think Drew Aller has to do that much here. I have the Penn State Nittany Lions moving on to the Final Four. And moving on to the Final Four, let's take a look at Texas versus Notre Dame, a blue blood matchup. I really like Notre Dame's ground game against Texas, but I don't think it's going to be like Texas Tech was. I think it's going to be a much more even matchup, and ultimately, I think it's going to be Arch Manning and his group of receivers receivers that go out and win this game. I think the first 2 or 3 quarters of this one are going to be smash mouth, run it down your throat football, and then when stuff opens up, I think that's when Arch Manning and his receivers takes advantage of that Notre Dame secondary that isn't bad, but it's probably not going to be able to handle all of that being thrown at them. I like Texas to win this matchup and head to the national championship game for the first time since 2010. And on the opposite side, I have Penn State and Alabama. And once again, I have the underdog Crimson Tide taking this one. I really like them as a kind of Ohio State figure this year. They don't make it quite as far as they should have in the regular season, but they bounce back and get a fire lit under them heading into the playoff. And I like this interior defensive line to give Penn State a problem in the running game. And when it comes down to it, we haven't seen Ty Simpson in big plays. We have seen Drew Aller in big plays, and I honestly just don't trust Drew Aller to make the play to give them a national championship berth. I think this is also a smash mouth, run it down your throat kind of game, but I have Alabama taking it in this one. And that leaves your national championship being Texas versus Alabama. And I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that matchup. These teams don't meet in the regular season, but they do end up meeting here in this scenario. And overall, I just like the Texas Longhorns all around much more than Alabama. I think Alabama's a very well-rounded unit, but Texas is well-rounded and going to be hyper efficient this year. That ground game is deep. The wide receiver room is deep. The defense is especially very deep. They're my top unit this year. And Alabama's a close second, but overall, I have Arch Manning and the Texas Longhorns hoisting that big tuba lip gloss and winning the national championship in 2025. And with that, thank you for watching. As always, be sure to like and subscribe if you did enjoy it. Let me know who you think wins each conference title and who ends up winning the national championship this year. And I will see you in the next one for our week 0 preview.